morning, everyone. Hi, how are you? My name is Jeannie Allen. Welcome to another in CER's Action Series number 6. So happy to have you today, this beautiful May 12th day, and I hope this event and that we find you well. Thanks again for joining us. We are so excited to be having a few hundred people coming on today for another exciting discussion about what we are doing here. Hi, Bruce. We're going to let you go for a couple of minutes until we bring you in. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good.
So to talk about where we are and how we might be able to learn from other organizations across the country. Before I do, a couple of housekeeping. If you've not yet been with us before, welcome for the first time. We typically have Q&A is where you can put your thoughts and comments and questions. We will get to them on a rolling basis if we can, and if not, at the end of each of our guests. Our guests, Mary Gifford and Bruce Robinson, will be coming on successively. So first we'll have Mary Gifford and then we'll have Bruce Robinson after that. And before I go into that, last week we inaugurated a new effort, and that was to introduce a book of the week. And so last week I talked about my book as a starter because I have moderator's privilege, which is The Unfinished Journey, Education, the American Dream. And today I'm recommending a new book I was just asked to review. Oops, it's getting into my virtual background. It's called A Fine Line, and it's by Tim DeRoche and with a foreword by Gloria Romero, who used to be in the General Assembly in California. And Tim documents basically how most kids are kept out of the best public schools and talks about the lines between zip codes. So we will put a fine line on our Twitter feed at EdReform, and hopefully, Beth Ann, you're doing that now. Look them up so people can link, and then we can all be following along. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my good friend, Mary Gifford, the president of StrongLine. Mary has been an education reformer before it was cool. For years and years, dating back from coming in from Arizona, but working nationally, first and foremost on the ground, bringing and helping usher in the state's charter school law, becoming part of the Arizona State Board of Education, becoming one of the first pioneers in virtual education with her work at K-12, and more recently on the board of the Foundation for Blended and Online Learning, the Arizona Chamber, and many, many, many other things. And recently, Mary took on StrongMind, which I was so impressed. I went to visit her briefly when I was in Arizona last year. Can we bring on Mary too, creative folks? And we was so impressed by what I saw there, Mary, and how much you all are putting to work this whole notion of digital learning, which now at this time, lots of people were interested before, but now we have an even more important burning need to know how it's done and what we can learn. So Mary, welcome.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Listen, Mary, why don't you start by love for you to tell us a little bit about just kind of what's happening. Just give us an overview. Let's not get to StrongMind yet. What's happening in Arizona? How do you think people are feeling about where we are at this moment in time? And do me just a huge favor, if you will just give us a little bit more volume on your computer, that would be great.
Can do.
Yeah, great.
So I think Arizona is in a good place. Our governor is starting to open the state up rather cautiously. Our state superintendent of instruction is going to have guidance for fall of 20 by the end of the month. So I think we're all waiting for that. In the meantime, all of the schools have transitioned to remote learning. Arizona, as you know, has probably about the third most as a percentage number of full-time online students. And so for a good portion of the state, this was already what they were doing and doing really well. And I think the rest of the state is doing what they can to learn and get through the balance of the school year. The legislature did some good things very quickly before going out of session. things like putting aside some additional funding for summer school, recognizing that there is going to be not just the summer slide, but the COVID slide. And so I think it's really great that the Arizona legislature recognized that and set aside some completely incremental funding just for summer school. So I think things are good here.
So what did you guys think when this all hit, right? When if this is one of those, where were you? What were you doing when? How did you decide to like? How did you think about transitioning? And then we'll jump into what you're really doing.
I think for StrongLine, the first thing we thought about, even before local entities and the United States government started closing down, states started closing down, we started thinking about the military families abroad and other foreign dignitaries who were abroad. And we started offering schooling to those abroad because they were not able to go to their schools internationally. And so I think we kind of started thinking about how do you help these people during these transitional times? For some, it is crisis, some it's just transition. And so we really started thinking well before states and federal government started closing things down. And then as we started seeing the closing down of schools, we started kind of ramping up an offering of free courses to school districts, private schools, and charter schools across the country for the balance of this semester. And we have some of them who have started doing that. And we really wanted to be able to offer a comprehensive solution. So they didn't have to worry about all the details since this was very new to them. And so that was how we responded immediately.
And what is Strong Mind? So let's start at the beginning. Strong Mind does what, is where, serves how many?
StrongLine is an education solutions firm. Previously considered ourselves kind of an ed tech firm, but in the last couple of years, we've really started developing more than just technology and courseware for students. Historically, StrongLine has supported Primavera online learning, high school and middle school. It's the largest online school in the state of Arizona and probably in the top 5 from a size perspective across the country. But StrongLine has partners in several states, California, Texas, Oklahoma, going into more states with a focus on supporting full-time online learning and hybrid or blended learning. And now with a new focus also on social emotional learning and developing an entire content, I won't call it courses, but content that can be integrated into courses beginning in the fall, recognizing that social emotional learning has probably never been more important than it will be starting in fall. So a big company doing more things and really being very focused in what we do.
So what is, one of the questions I have for you, Mary, that came up really this morning in my head, if you mind, is going back and forth on Twitter with folks about what the new normal is going to be, the future of school. As you know, we're talking a lot about, some of you out there are following what we're doing and what we're trying to recommend. And someone said, well, we're going to go back to a hybrid, which, I couldn't agree more with at this point in time, the practical level, even if we need to see more of it. But I think a lot of people confuse hybrid learning with online, that it all has to be online, that somehow there's a either or. We're either all going back to brick and mortar if they were there, or they're all going to go to online, fueled schools like the ones you support. What is hybrid really?
I think that normal isn't going to exist. My husband jokingly says normal is just a setting on the washing machine, and it is. There is nothing normal anymore. Hybrid is really figuring out how to flex your building, your time, the teacher, technology, and curriculum, and really figuring out how to flex all of those things to accommodate kids. And so I think one of the great things that's going to happen by fall is that we're going to have much more student-centered learning because they're going to figure out that they have to flex now. We used to think about finding those few district leaders or charter leaders or private school leaders who are ready to talk about hybrid and blended. now everybody has to talk about it. They have to figure this out. And so they're going to have to figure out how do we think about buildings differently than we ever have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the glass being half full right now, is that it's not worrying about the safety and sanitary standards within buildings. It's actually starting to think about what part of instruction actually needs to occur in a building. And so it should be a hybrid program, a robust hybrid program would have a good blend. It would have opportunities for kids to learn independently online, in small groups online, in small groups in person, direct instruction from a teacher online, direct instruction from a teacher in person, project-based learning that could be done in groups or individually,
Right.
really figuring out the best instructional practices and figuring out how to bend time and space.
Okay, and this is probably an unfair question for you because we didn't talk about it, but maybe not because you are a pro. But can you remember a time maybe when you first started out in the quote unquote egg reform world where these concepts of innovation were as foreign as they seem today? Because I'm hearing you and I'm tracking, right? I'm tracking with project-based learning because I have the luxury of being able to do this for a living, right? It's fantastic. It's the best job in the world. But there's people out there going, oh my gosh, get me out of this. Or there's school leaders we know online right now. There's media. There's colleagues like yours who are in the ed tech world, and they're saying, yeah, I get it, but how do we translate that to mom and dad? So, one, what is it really that we need to do most to allow people to kind of get beyond this, idea of normal? And secondly, how can you guys at Strong Mind help them overcome that?
I love that you introduced the role of parents in this. Parents are your first and most important teacher. And so what I hope happens is that this time that parents have had their children at home, that they now know best how their students learn, how long during a day they can focus, what gets them most excited, what do they struggle the most with, and have really, really deep conversations with the education professionals when they go back to school in the fall, whatever school may look like. And that, I think, is the best way to start focusing in on what it should look like student by student. You know, parents are observing a lot, teachers observe a lot, and now we can actually put it together and figure out what that should look like for every single student. And I think when we think about delivering up options for teachers to implement, we really need to think about the teacher who has never really embraced technology, the teacher who was an early adopter, the teacher who does project-based learning really well, and a teacher who struggles with developing lesson plans around that. And I hope that the educational leaders look for products and services that really would cover that range so that the experience for kids doesn't suffer. And, I kind of jokingly call it add water and stir. We need, hybrid lessons that could be used in a multitude of ways, irrespective of the teacher's experience using this and irrespective of how a kiddo learns.
Right.
So not allowing us to fall into one size fits all online, one size fits all hybrid, or one size fits all in the building.
So how does Strong Mind do it then? How do you attract people? How do you make sure students are actually learning in real time? I don't know whether this would be an appropriate time to maybe show the video that you have, but get real granular for us about the actual products and tools that you utilize that we can learn from and understand how this might play into the new normal.
And I think the tools can be used differently for full-time online or hybrid, but they're similar tools. In the hybrid schools, we see teachers actually interacting and observing students throughout the day, tracking what the students are doing through software, but actually laying eyes on them and tracking them. Also submission of coursework electronically, grading of coursework electronically, discussion chat boards that would replace the in-person communication with kids that teachers are grading. Looking for engagement in teacher-led classrooms like a Zoom room. You can poll kids, you can actually put them in breakout rooms, have them create the web for an essay together, have them edit essays together. It really is dependent on how the teacher wants to use the technology and the courseware. And it's figuring out what good teaching looks like in this modality. And good teaching is good teaching.
So are a lot of your programs then video related? Like, tell us a little bit about the tools, the actual tools.
All of our courses are really heavy in media, and that's a choice we made. We think that a lot of kids today learn, they love TikTok, they love YouTube, and so we have a lot of media within our courses. We also have courses that are laid out to explain to students and teachers what the objectives are, how they relate to the state standards, and focusing a lot on mastery, recognizing kids are going to take a different amount of time to get through different content, and really focusing on mastery. It is, I think, well done. This could be, any kid could be successful in this setting. They may not want all of their courses delivered like this.
Right.
I think most of the students across the country are going to have some courses that are electronically delivered. And so really thinking about how they accommodate different learning styles. Again, it can't all be video. It can't all be reading. And it really needs to have multiple ways throughout to check for knowledge. And so I think that is something else we've done a very good deal, starting with backward design with the standards working forward in a course.
Is there a best practice in your guys' minds about synchronous versus asynchronous?
I personally think that synchronous instruction is amazing when well done. And it can be well done, I think, in two different ways. It could be that teacher who is really great on camera and a content expert and is just riveting. It's the teacher you can't take your eyes off of. I think that can be really well done. I also think there is the teacher who is really great at engaging kids synchronously and can manage the technology very well and can poll them and give kids authority to do some things within the online classroom. So I think it can be really done well either way, either super duper engaging from getting kids engaged in using technology, or an absolute master of content who's great on camera.
And what kind of examples have you seen in sort of the varying differences? In other words, what have you seen students, lots of talk about student agency out there, what is out there really that we could most learn from in terms of both?
I have a memory of probably 7 or 8 years ago being at a colleague's house, a K-12 colleague who had a student in one of the virtual schools, and hearing in the background a science lesson from a teacher, an online teacher who I knew from a totally different state. And I said, "What is your daughter doing listening to this science teacher from another state?" And she said to me, "Oh, all the kids listen to this science teacher. He's so great. Kids across the country tune in to listen to this science teacher." And so it was one of those things where it was like a wake-up call for me that good teaching can really happen in a massive way like this. And it was science. It was not easy content. So I think I've seen that happening. I think that we do need to do more training for teachers on this. It's not going to come naturally for a lot of them. But I think that we can figure out how to work with teachers to leverage what they do feel comfortable with. Again, the teacher who's really great with technology, but not necessarily comfortable in front of the camera, great time to turn your classroom over to the kids and have the kids direct some of the instruction that day, just like you would do in a regular classroom. Have the kids up on the board working on problems, have the kids in a breakout room, have the kids actually working in your electronic classroom. So I think there are ways to leverage the parts that teachers are comfortable with like they would in a classroom.
And what about, Mary, the criticism, and we've heard this a lot, the criticism that, the kids can't do this on their own and parents can't be home, and like this is just kind of a luxury. Is it a luxury to be online? Is it a luxury? And I wouldn't just say be online, hybrid, whatever. Is this what we're only talking about, the top 10% of people? Kind of how do you address the access issue?
Oh, I think this is something that has come back around in the last 2 months. I feel like we actually addressed this and put it to bed 10 years ago, and now it has resurfaced. If you look at the demographics of the students who are enrolled in the fully online schools over the last decade and a half, they actually represent the average population. They have a similar percentage of special education students. They have a similar percentage of 504 students, a similar percentage of students eligible for free and reduced lunch.
So interesting.
And so the demographics don't bear out this argument that this is for a certain sect of the population. Look at the 15 years of data of kids who've been doing this and doing it successfully. Do I think a parent in the home is a great thing? Yes, but that isn't just for kids who are learning online. It's just as important for a parent to open the regular backpack as it is to open the virtual backpack. But irrespective of demographics, kids can succeed. It's about engagement. It's not about income, it's about engagement. And as long as the student is willing to engage and there's some quality teaching and quality curriculum on the other end, any child can be successful online.
So I know you're in Arizona and you do serve people in other states, as you all said, but talk a little bit about the perspective. You started out, Mary, in the beginning mentioning that the Arizona legislature was trying to figure out as they went into COVID, they delivered more money. I'm sure they're debating, like many, many states, what school looks like after COVID. And so is it about innovation writ large? Will this just be another option? Do you think districts will be looking to you more and more to partner? I mean, again, if you think about all the jokes like when we were charter school laws were first coming out, was one innovation, decentralization and district-based, control was another innovation. And people are like, oh my God, people can't possibly have choice. They can't possibly make choices. And then, whatever. What is the way we can frame this? Like, is Arizona going to be on the cutting edge where we're going to be copying it on something like this? What kind of give us your crystal ball?
I hope Arizona's on the cutting edge. One of the things I love that's happening right now that reminds me so much of 25 years ago when the charter laws were being enacted is public policy discussions are happening around dining room tables. They're happening over dinner, and they're not happening necessarily in the state houses because they can't right now. And I think wonderful public policy ideas are going to emerge because everyone's thinking about it and everyone's talking about it because it has immediate application to families right now. I hope Arizona remains a leader. We definitely have been leaders in the number of charter schools, the percentage of kids in charter schools, the percentage of students going into private school options. So I hope that all those options remain and that we don't look at this as a crisis that has to be responded to. Rather, we actually do look at this as the opportunity to, again, bend space and time and rethink the role of all of those major components. They're not going to go away. Teachers are still going to be around. They're going to be critically important. Buildings still need to be around. But
Right.
how we interact within buildings, how we use buildings, how we interact with teachers, this is the time to actually innovate and think differently. And I hope that we can get to that point rather than just dealing with the crisis.
And what about the content? This becomes a huge, huge issue. Oh, it looks like we have the video up. Terrific. Let's play that video, and then we'll take the content question from there, because I really want to see, as we play this and talk about it, what kind of cool ways content should be delivered? Okay. that's a classroom I would have loved my kids to attend. What do you have to do with Valor Academy?
Valor Academy is a new charter school, started last fall, and it is a fully hybrid school. And the wonderful thing is, middle of March, when all schools had to start teaching from home, the kids seamlessly transitioned from home because they were so used to using technology. We provide the insights, we provide all of the curriculum and all the training and support for teachers. I was noticing some questions. I think when thinking about content online, it's important to actually make sure that the state standards are covered.
Right.
And knowing if they aren't, where they aren't, and that's where, again, good teaching comes in, and teachers could fill those gaps. I also think it's important to think about content that is agnostic to platform. And if you have invested in some technology as a district charter school or private school, you've built a platform, you've invested in a platform, find content that will play in your platform. And there's a lot of it out there. And again, don't forget the role of the teacher in all of this. The teacher remains very important.
So, hello everyone. Hi, Jeannie. I'm going to cut in. Michael Masante, Center for Education Reform. Good to see you all again. Mary, can you dive a little bit deeper in, because we have two great questions from Stephanie Meyer. It says, do you take content and you create it in a cool visual online way that they can then put on top of their platforms, websites, and already existing? So if you could just address that. And then what do you do though, like for that science teacher that you were speaking about? If they're teaching from another area, whose standards are you going by? You're going by the state that you're sitting in, right? Not the state that they're teaching from. Just a clarification on that. And then we have some other great questions for you.
Yep. I think, again, content should be agnostic with respect to platform, especially if the public school or private school is already invested in a platform.
Right.
You should find content that will play. And definitely our content will play on a multitude of platforms. And that I think is essential for any kind of good content. I do think that it can be aligned very closely to state standards. There are some states that have standards that are a little funky, and a national curriculum may not perfectly align. But that again is where there needs to be a lot of transparency in showing the district charter or private school where there isn't alignment, making recommendations for teacher content that could be developed. And again, there is no textbook outside of a couple states where a textbook is fully aligned. Teachers know what to do as long as they have the information. They know where it lacks alignment, they know what to do.
And you just gave me sort of an aha that I wonder if other people are having out there, which is, and of course, even after seeing sort of the Valor video and with the answers to these questions. So I'm creating a school, or I'm trying to like tool up a school right now. I'm trying to make sure that there are programs that are available. And I say, I need someone to come in and do this for me, help take me remote or move my stuff online. You're not saying that StrongLine only has one way to do it and that it's just your stuff and not mine. You can actually incorporate my school programs content somehow into what you're doing?
I think we definitely could. What we would love to do is be part of those front end conversations and identify how to best do what the school needs. And it may be a combination of things, it may not be. But those are the conversations we're eager to have. Rather, right now the conversations are like, how do we meet the basic needs of kids while they're learning remotely? To have an earnest discussion about, here's what we bring to the table, what do you bring to the table to make the best experience for kids. Those are great conversations, and that's our exact approach. We are not a one size fits all, take it or leave it, the whole package. We really believe in figuring out how we can help schools solve their problems and offer up specific solutions. And we're all about how do we figure out how to make that special for them based on their needs.
And Jeannie, we got Valor, a couple questions about Valor. Mary, what are the age group? Is it elementary, middle, high? And then what is the focus in terms of content, audience? And Bob Moranto says, April says hi.
Hi, Bob and April, and your wonderful kids, wonderful boys. So Valor is started in middle school and it's expanding now into 10th grade, 1 through 9th, and is expanding into 10th grade and will grow up into all of the high school grades. It is in West Phoenix, and since it has a building component, it's important to think about geography with that one. The content is really, I wouldn't say it's not back to basics, it's not traditional, it's not liberal arts. It is really rich content, starting with the standards, working backward with a lot of infused media and a lot of good hands-on activities for kids that work really well in a brick and mortar setting as well.
And one of the things I remember seeing when I visited you was that there were a lot of designers and there were a lot of whiteboards. And so one thing that didn't come through in my early questioning that I'd love you to address is why? Like, what? There were literally dozens of people in little rooms and tables creating like almost cartoons. And so tell people what that is about. What are they likely to get? Because we've seen on these webinars people with pad and paper, if you will, and some people doing remote just like this. But what was that piece? And Michael, you didn't have to leave, but anyway, go ahead.
We have a ton of engineers, and this is one of the things that really drew me to StrongLine. And amongst the engineering team is a very sizable team of creative folks. These are the people who you would imagine are at Pixar Studios. And they are actually designing a lot of the media that goes in. It's not just a person on camera. A lot of the media is digital media because that's what kids love. And so, they are designing digital media. We have a wonderful research lab where we actually can do focus groups and test out things. And it's wonderful. You can go out there and you can see them testing the last math lesson that they developed. So our stuff is highly engineered while also being highly creative. It's a very great combination.
All right, we've got, I think, time. Jeannie, 2 more questions. We're going to bring in. Okay,
Great.
last 2 questions for Mary here. Mary, do you work with traditional schools or do you have clients that are other types of organizations, educational organizations like nonprofits, Boys and Girls Clubs, Teen Pack? And then how does a hybrid approach work for pre-K to 4th grade? How would you design it? What would it look like? That second one seems to be a pretty in-depth, but if you could give us a Reader's Digest condensed version, then we could get you in touch with those folks asking and you could go have a more in-depth conversation.
Absolutely. So yes, we do. On the first question, we absolutely do. And we can work with people. We work with traditional districts. We work with private schools, religious schools, charter schools, and some nonprofits. We work with Bronald Learning Partners, which is a nonprofit headquartered in Arizona. But we work kind of with all of those different kinds of groups. And again, we're fairly agnostic about what kind of learning partner it is. We just want them to be focused on customizing learning for kids, and we're in. With respect to pre-K through 4, I think the role of the teacher becomes incredibly important, and what the role of the parent is.
Right.
And being very specific about what gets done in the classroom versus at home. This is where you would have to have a good conversation about emergent readers. Not all students are going to learn to read at the same pace or in the same way. Some are going to need, very, very phonemic awareness tiles and things. Some are going to use context words. And so it really depends on what we can put in a classroom versus what they can do independently. And even independently, they're going to need a guiding hand from a loving adult, probably.
That's pretty extraordinary, Mary. And I know that also you have provided lots and lots of counsel to people, even outside StrongMind, about how their county, city, state, school should think about change. And so I would just commend to everybody out there to get in touch with Mary at StrongMind. We can certainly put you all in touch with people who are there, so please let us know, because I have to tell you, there's so few people that have been in and around this sort of innovation curve as long as Mary, even though she's super young. It's only been happening a couple of decades, but there's so much going on out there. And I love the fact that you guys straddle sort of the public-private charter and youth group area. And so I know there are people who would love for you all to speak to them, and we are just so grateful that you took the time. And so thank you for spending time with us today as we shift, and I'm sure we'll be having more conversations, and please keep us in touch with where you go from here.
Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks, Michael.
So our next guest today is Bruce Robinson, the CEO and president of Independence Mission School. It's so interesting, folks, that we're going from kind of, the hybrid online digital world to the space where someone who's been running what is considered very traditional schools became very transformative, not just now, but even before COVID, as he and his organization tried to kind of rescue Catholic schools in Philadelphia. Bruce Robinson, welcome to our virtual reality series.
Hello, Jeannie. How are you today?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And for folks out there who are not familiar with Independence Mission Schools, nonprofit network, 15 independent Catholic schools, providing transformative education to 5,000 students of all faiths in low-income neighborhoods, supported both by private pay, philanthropy, as well as Pennsylvania's education tax credits programs. And Bruce, what struck us, which we welcome, what struck us is so interesting, is reading about how you guys literally almost turned on a dime to start delivering virtual instruction. I go, wow, urban, again, people don't think about Catholic schools as cutting edge, although you know that they have to become more innovative if they're gonna survive. Tell us first about Independence and what did you do to transition in this difficult moment in time?
So the network started when the Archdiocese was planning to close some schools, and some philanthropists came in and sort of rescued these basket of schools. And the network has been around now for 7 years. And it's always a struggle, but the network is going strong. And the model kind of sets up with a strong central office model. So, we have a, definite, sort of academic leaders that are kind of thinking about these things all the time. And as this stuff started to happen, and it was no surprise because we started to see things happening up in New York, our group started to let our principals know that all the teachers need to prepare 2 weeks worth of materials and packets for students to be able to leave school with.
Right.
So before any of the closures happened, we were preparing for the fact that this could happen and this could buy us a few weeks' time. That did occur. And then we immediately, by the following week, we were online communicating with families. And once again, when you're serving underserved families, that leads into another whole set of challenges with regards to internet accessibility, device availability, knowledge of how to operate devices, all these types of things. But literally the day we closed schools, we were up and online teaching. And that's because we have some really strong, innovative thinkers with regards to that.
And I'm wondering also, spend a couple of minutes chatting with us about Independence Mission Schools as a network. As I recall, you were all one of the first cities to look at independent Catholic schools and parishes and say, how do we help them continue to survive, grow, and kind of improve what they're doing? And so, as you said, you kind of created this new model, this centralized operational model where each of the schools are independent, but they are strung together in a network that's supported so they can focus on the core mission. Is that kind of how it works?
So, pulling from Mary's concept, we're a little bit of a hybrid. And, so what we're able to do is, with that central office concept, we provide HR services, we provide accounting services. We drive the curriculum from the central office. So it makes it easier for principals and teachers to know what the content is rather than each school kind of doing their own thing. But that being said, each school has an independent identity. They have their own uniforms. The families don't identify with Independence Mission Schools. The families identify with the individual school that their child goes to, and that is great. So we have a lot of individuality, but we also have a consistency of standards, which I think is important when you're trying to drive academic quality. How can you ensure what's going on in 15 schools? And when we invest a lot of money in teacher training and principal training and continuing education, and consistency in curriculum is important when you're training, because otherwise you're trying to deal with dozens of different kinds of curriculum that might be going on in various schools.
And do those schools choose to be part of the Independence Mission School network?
Those schools did, because for the most part, they were slated to close.
Mm-hmm.
So this group of philanthropists came in and there was an agreement with the local pastor, and the local pastor was sort of happy to sort of say, that's great, you're going to take full financial responsibility for the building, for the school, and I don't have any obligation. They were thrilled with that arrangement, because for many of these situations, the school is a financial drain on the parish.
Right.
And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's a drain, so you start cutting costs. When you cut costs, quality goes down, then you lose more kids, so you lose more money. So this ended up being a good situation. That being said, we do get, some public money through the tax credit program,
Mm-hmm.
but because our families come from underserved neighborhoods, we provide, our tuition covers about 45% of our costs. So we have to raise the balance of that money. And that's a fairly heavy lift. We probably raise about $15 million every year to keep the network alive.
And why do they choose your schools, Bruce?
I think there's numerous reasons why they choose it. I think, one of the things, and this always kind of bothered me, that people would say, I want to go to a school because it's safe. And, I think some of us that come from different stages in life don't understand what that means.
Mm.
But in many of these neighborhoods, there is a high degree of violence and crime. And knowing that their kids are in a safe, welcoming environment is important to people. I think knowing that the focus on academics is there, and most of our schools are located in neighborhoods where the local public school has been deemed a failing school by the state of Pennsylvania. Right. So the options are not great for families. The other thing we provide with our Catholic values is, we're providing a character education for kids. And, we want our kids to not only be bright, but we want them to come out and be good citizens on top of that. And what does that mean? Does it mean compassion? Does it mean helping others? Does it mean being courteous? Like, all these attributes that will make good adults and good friends are values that we imbue in our schools. So I think the combination of good Catholic values and character traits, I think the strong academics that we provide to the network, and then finally a safe, warm, welcoming environment where everybody feels like they're welcome there is the combination that draws people to our schools.
And I think that's what parents also sometimes think when they say safe. They're also thinking of that care and concern. They're safe there today. There's something around them that's going to make sure they're protected, not physically, but also kind of emotionally and, as we know, spiritually. So again, we then enter, so now you're in this sort of interesting hybrid network of 15 Catholic schools in Philly, very, working class and poor, largely, right? Minority students. And now we transition, now we have this virus, everyone's home. And I'm hearing like Philadelphia tanked completely for the most part for a few weeks. Other urban areas, you guys got to work. How? I mean, how and who are you reaching?
So I think the school district of Philadelphia started out saying, well, if we can't serve special needs students, we're not going to serve anybody, which I don't personally believe with. And I guess after a little bit of backlash, they didn't agree with either because they changed course.
Yeah.
But as we started, we got our packets out, our kids were learning immediately. And as we started to go online, we identified some weaknesses in that rollout. And part of that was because the lack of available devices. So we were able, with the help of philanthropists that supported what we were trying to do, we distributed about 1,300 Chromebooks to our students, which represents about 30% of our population.
Wow.
And what we have found as we track through that, there's been over 95 to close to 100% participation. So once somebody got that device, then they were able to start participating in online learning right away. And sometimes you say, well, geez, if you got the device, then why wouldn't you participate? But then you realize then maybe there is that digital divide with regards to internet accessibility, or maybe there is someone that gets this Chromebook and has no idea how to operate it. So there's all these little, you open one door and you think
Right.
you've gotten through, and then suddenly there's another door. But through the help of many people, we were able to bring all of our students, online and learning. And I think right now, when we look at a network, we are between 75 and 80% of our students are engaged on a daily basis.
Wow.
And, I think when, there was an article in the Sunday New York Times comparing a religious school in Chicago that charges almost $30,000 versus an inner city Philadelphia school. And, one of the takeaways from the article is the teacher said, I have 28 children and 11 sign in per day. And I think that's part of the challenge. But the fact that we have high engagement is really positive for us. The advantage that we have over, let's say, a public school is the fact that our parents, everyone has to pay something. And the fact that parents are paying something means that there is a higher degree of engagement. That being said, many of our parents are primary caregivers.
Right.
Many of our parents work outside the house. So the support network is not necessarily the same as you might find in other more affluent areas. So we try to fill in the gaps where we can.
But you're also reaching out on a regular basis, right? 2 to 3 times a week you're reaching out. And what struck me about that New York Times article, great reporter Dana Goldstein, but I feel like she missed the mark by a mile, because the two comparisons it kind of puts this visual in everyone's head that if you're in a wealthy suburban or wealthy urban school of any kind, things are working. And if you're in an urban school, they're not. And that's just not the case. I mean, we've talked to people in both, lots of them, and they have not, they don't report the same results. What they report is if you train your teachers, if you're in touch with your parents, if you are prepared, if you have good content, if you have some buy-in, whether it's by choice or not, then people are engaged. And so what struck us about, your illustration and why we wanted to bring you, Bruce, with sort of juxtapose Mary and online and virtual and hybrid, is it's happening in Arizona and it's happening in Philly. It's happening in California, right? And it's happening in Kansas. And so, what are those sort of things that you can help us think about? Let's say we're crafting policy together for the governors or, the nation and want people to take away. What are the things like we need to know to be able to do that?
I mean, I think that the thing, when you get down to why is something successful, I mean, for us, we have teachers, and I'm in awe of what they are doing. They turned on a heartbeat, and they were teaching in a classroom, and less than a week later, they were putting lessons up online. And some of the teachers were not as proficient with technology, but they dove in and got themselves up to speed. And they are reaching out. If they notice somebody is having a difficulty, they go back and reach out to them. If they notice that somebody is not signing in, they're getting our counselors, and the principal and the counselor and the teacher are trying to reach out to the family. So there's a personal touch. And I think that sometimes, when you're in difficult neighborhoods, our kids often bring trauma with them when they come to school. And that's the thing that's really difficult for
Right.
us, that we can help them when they're face to face with us. It is much more difficult to do that over a screen. That being said, we do everything we can to do that. But, our teachers are working incredibly hard. And, they're not only giving the live instruction, but they're reaching out individually. And then there may be parents that are working and they get home at 6:30 at night, and now they sit down with their child to go over the schoolwork, and they're emailing the teacher at 8 o'clock at night. So the teacher, their day has just been elongated, from a school day to well into the evening. So it's been a difficult, transition.
Yeah.
And I think that, one of the challenges is the way this is set up. I don't know if it's sustainable long term, because America counts on schools for childcare. And people go to work and their kids are in school, and then they make arrangements. There could be after school programs or a grandmother or somebody else that takes care of the child. But when the child's at home and the parent has to work, what does that look like? And then what does it look like with the teachers saying, hey, like I'm in school at 7 o'clock in the morning and
Yeah.
I'm answering emails, because they feel guilty, because there's a child that didn't maybe check in that day, but the
Right.
parent is trying to get them caught up. And there they are at 8:30 at night, corresponding with the parent. So it's a model that is working, I think, because people care. But sustainably, can something like that continue? I'm not sure.
Well, and let me just ask you one of my final questions. Then Michael's got a few for you, and maybe this is a longer conversation. But I just heard a couple of things from you. First of all, I heard that there are parents, even in adverse circumstances, who are checking in with their kids and online. And I think that's something we don't hear enough. We just assume they couldn't possibly be doing it. And the second thing I heard from you about the sustainability is that, yeah, maybe it's not a permanent solution, but there's going to have to be some sort of a shift, is what I'm hearing you say. Can you envision what this looks like come September, when we are, jigsawing back and forth, when parents are concerned? And to your point about schools have become childcare, and that's why people are like, get my kids home, I got to get out of here. And even the most affluent parents are seeing this. Like, there's jokes all over in television. Maybe there's a different way, right? So what is a way, like, when you think about how September looks, how do we address all those things?
I find that to be an extremely difficult question, because our schools are probably like 98% of school buildings in America. They have lots of classrooms. The classrooms are built with desks for 30 kids, and maybe there's 25 in the class, but if you were trying to figure out what social distancing would look like, how does that work?
Right.
Do you have kids come in for 1 week and then other kids come in for another week? Do you do some kids come in the morning, some kids come in the afternoon?
Do you go to the night? Do you have weekends? I mean, think about buildings that are empty a lot of times. Yeah,
What does the busing situation look like then if you're
right.
splitting the day? And then, I still get back to, even if it's a 1 week on, 1 week off, or every other day, like how do those parents reacclimate themselves into the workforce? And are their employers willing to say, oh, sure, like I understand you're going to work remotely. I think that is a great white collar thing to work remotely. But most blue collar jobs, you need to
You
be
can't.
on site. So that's, to me, the real challenge. And I'm just not sure where this is going to go. And it keeps me up at night because I worry about the kids and them falling further behind. And I guess the concept might be if kids are in school for 1 week, the week that they're not in school, they're still learning remotely. So you're continuing to get some velocity.
Right.
But I think it's more difficult, for kids to learn completely remotely, unless they do have some parental help. I mean, how do you get a first grader or second grader to sit in front of a screen for hours on end without somebody else directing them? So,
Well, and this is where I think a whole host of innovations may actually end up evolving. We're talking to folks like, PBS Learning has an incredible program that someone could stand up at a local library. Mary was talking about their Serving Boys and Girls Club. We were on a call yesterday with a charter that's going to be coming to talk with us in a couple of weeks that's creating their own little organized learning communities to create a hybrid. So you may end up seeing, I don't know if any of you remember, Bruce, remember the book years ago, Michael, you and I have talked about this, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, how we've gone from a society reliant on civic institutions to be part of our world to where almost none exist. And there's lots of reasons for that, but part of it is also because we rely on schools to be childcare. Well, imagine if churches, civic institutions, all elderly, which by the way, baby boomers are now considered, so I don't think that's really the case, but right, Bruce? And so what if we were to be able to create these institutions again to be lots and lots of different parts and aspects of our students' learning? I think we're moving to that by necessity, and maybe not just by necessity physically, but morally.
so there's been so much written about the PPP loans. And if you look at those loans, they were meant to be a bridge to get us to the end of June when this would all be over. And now here we are sitting there saying, when is it going to be over? Will it be over in 2020? We don't know. So, things are changing so rapidly. I think what this has done is it's recalibrated people's thinking. I think 60 days ago, if you would talk to people and said, your children are going to be learning remotely at home, I think that parents would have said, that's crazy, that'll never happen, that'll never work. I'm sure teachers and administrators would have said, that would take a year at least to figure out. But it happened. And I think people are adjusting, and kids are learning, and kids are resilient. And are they getting as much as they might be in person in a classroom? Maybe not, but they're learning other things by being resilient. And they're picking up some skills, such as grit and figuring out ways to fight through difficulties. So there are some really good things that are coming out of this. And I do think that the mindset of everybody has changed. And I think that there will always be some degree of online learning that's going to be happening now because it's been introduced and it's been accepted.
And I think to your point, you know, how do you get these younger kids to sit in front of a screen that long? If you make it exciting, to Jeannie's point, if you innovate, if you stimulate, then I think there's a difference. Like if they can sit in front of hours of playing a game, they can sit in front of hours and learn. And it's just shocking to me how quickly innovation, how quickly both private sector and in partnership with the public sector can often partner and really push the envelope forward. Bruce, we have some folks that want to connect with you after, and we will definitely facilitate those relationships. We had one question from Robert Morento. The private religious school that the New York Times covered, again, spends $28,000 per child. I know you talked about this a little bit. That's not typical. How much is your tuition again, and how many kids do you serve over all 15 schools?
Or how much does it cost, not just what your tuition is? What does it cost you per student on average?
Yes.
Okay, so our cost per student is about $5,700, and that does not include title funds that we receive from the government. Our stated tuition was $4,500. And our average family pays about $2,000. Most people pay well under that. So that's sort of, as I said, we get about 45% of our total operating revenue from tuition, and everything else has to come from philanthropy or tax credits.
And Bruce, what planning timeline are you using as you start to look forward and prepare for returning to school, potential resurgence of COVID? You know, what is the plan that you're putting into place, and on what timeline are you working?
So we have set up a committee internally to start researching what other areas of the country are doing, and also what Europe is doing, because Europe is sort of ahead of us with regards to this. And, you know, there's just, you know, some interesting things that are going on where, you know, they have the kids wearing hats and coats because they have all the windows open in the classroom to keep fresh air coming in. And
Wow.
they're wearing outfits that show 6 feet of distancing, that so they can't bump into something unless they're 6 feet away. So once again, people are innovative, people are creative. I saw one screen where it was a classroom of desks and they were all surrounded basically in plexiglass. And I'm just trying to figure out like what does that
realistic
look like?
Yeah.
And how, you know, can that work? And is it something that, you know, many people, they keep talking about taking the temperature, but that doesn't deal with people that are asymptomatic and, you know, are carrying the disease but don't have a fever. So are we doing things just because we're showing that we're doing things, or are they really making a difference? So we're looking at what Europe is doing. You know, we're you know, looking at what other school districts and, you know, innovators are doing in the United States, and we're developing our plan from that.
And I think that as you continue to do that, and I wonder if we can just bring Mary back in for a close on this. As you continue to do that, Bruce, we're going to, you know, be watching and rooting. You know, I do think that the extent to which the school systems and the other organizations in the city are willing to work with you will make that easier. I'm hoping that kind of results in more collaboration, but I just can't imagine having to think through, you know, is it going to be the plexiglass like I had to deal with at CVS the other day? And as you were saying about clothes and how the desks are set up, it's just so much to ask, but it does become kind of the new reality.
I think parents are going to be concerned. Teachers are going to be
Absolutely.
concerned. You know, so as you say, the new reality is we have to address it. We can't pretend that it doesn't exist. So we'll take every precaution that we can, but we also want to make sure that it also makes sense for everybody too.
Yeah, makes sense. Mary, do you want to come back and join us? Can we spotlight Mary for any kind of closing comments? And I wonder if there aren't some things you both can learn from each other too, right? As you continue to go down that road.
Jeannie, we may have lost
Did we
Mary.
lose her? Okay, we may have. I know. I don't know if she was hanging on, but thank
Hashtag
you.
bring Mary back.
But thank you so much, Bruce, for joining us and for sharing. We will make sure that everybody out there who wants to get in touch is able to get in touch with you. And I hope that cities like Newark, before they close any more schools, call you first, because I think there's solutions. Because as you know, we believe at CER that we need every arsenal in the battle. Public, private, charter, and our Catholic schools did in fact create the greatest generation, and so or help support it. So anyway, hats off to you for the work you're doing, and to everyone who joined us again out there, thank you so much. You guys have been resilient and terrific, and we're grateful for your continued involvement. Michael, who do we have coming up next week? We have the superintendent and school board president of
New Orleans Public School District. And we also have Kevin Chavis of K-12.
K-12. Yep.
Very exciting. Two very unique sets of guests. One leading a company that has been doing this for a long time, even though everyone thinks that virtual online learning is new. K-12 has been around for how long, Jeannie?
Gosh, almost 20 years, if not more. Yeah.
22 years. And of course, New Orleans, where it took a hurricane to transform an education system and sector, and some great, amazing things. You know, not to drag this out, but I did want to say, you know, Bruce had made the comment about how buildings all look the same, you know, the rooms 30. If you go into any public or private Catholic school that was built, they all use those same sand-colored tile, that brick. It's the same exact color. It doesn't matter if I was in my hometown or if I'm in Washington, D.C. You go in, it's like this was the only brick available from 1912 to 1979, and it will be used for all schools.
Well, they were probably created by Italian immigrants, and so that's why they're still there, which is not a bad thing.
No,
right?
Now look, Musante, I can do this. The guy's like, we got a lot of it that's sitting in the corner. Go ahead, all of that brick and build all of the schools, because that's the only one we got that's cheap. You take it.
And on that note, we end on the great Italian accent and the tribute to their industriousness. Again, Bruce, thank you. Michael, thanks for co-hosting, and thanks to everybody for joining us. Please join us again next week. Send us cards, letters at events@edreform.com, and let us know what else you want us to be covering. Thanks all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.